everyone. If I can just have you silent for a moment, we're going to get started. We are starting. Don't want the lights turned down just yet. Thank you. We've got something in store for you later, so we will share that with you. I'd like to say good evening, first of all, and greetings. My name is Judge DEBRA NANCE. My name is Judge DEBRA NANCE. Is that better? Testing? That's a lot better. Good evening, everyone. I'm Judge DEBRA NANCE, and I serve the 46th District Court representing Southfield, Lathrop Village, Beverly Hills, Bingham Farms, and Franklin Village. I have the pleasure of being your moderator tonight. I would like to welcome those who are here tonight, as well as those who are following us live stream on the City of Southfield Facebook page, courtesy of Southfield and Southfield Channel 15. First, I'd like to extend a warm welcome and appreciation to a few public officials that took the time out of their busy schedules to be here tonight for this very important forum. I have here John Macarena, the Deputy City Administrator, is here with us. John, could you just stand and wave? Thank you, John. Also, City Councilman Ari Mandelbaum. Councilman Mandelbaum, thank you. And Nita Simone from the Chaldean Council, the Arab Chaldean Council. Thank you, Nina, for appearing. I'd also like to extend, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the panel that's here tonight. We have Oakland County Commissioner Janet Jackson. Janet, just wave. State Representative Jeremy Moss. City of Southfield Fire Chief Johnny Menifee is yet to join us. I understand that there was, we've got a circumstance going on in the city, and he is, quite frankly, where he should be now. We hope he's on his way. We hope that he joins us momentarily. I'd also like to introduce Christina Nicholas from the Oakland County Health Network, as well as Attorney Mark Bernstein from the Bernstein Law Firm. Also with us here tonight is Tracy Sharikas from Families Against Narcotics. That's your local Oakland County fan chapter. And we will be joined later by Oakland County Sheriff Michael Bouchard. I'd like to say just a few words first as to why we are here tonight and how this all came about. Over the past 6 years, I've been on the bench here in the district now for 6 years. Over the past 6 years, I've seen the impact that opioid use has had on our community and in our courts. And matters ranging from retail frauds to driving under the influence, I have found that many are hooked on opioids when they come before me as defendants in my courtroom. In early 2016, I was invited to a forum at Groves High School here in Beverly Hills in our district. I'm not sure who sent the invitation. It appeared one day on my email. Perhaps I got it from the Families Against Against Narcotics chapter, but it appeared interesting to me, so I attended. The auditorium, I'm going to be very honest with you, at Groves High School was packed to the proverbial rafters. There was literally only standing room, much as there appears to be here tonight. The author, Sam Quinones, he's the author of a book called DREAMLAND, The True Tale of America's Opiate Epidemic, was the keynote speaker. Mr. Quinones held the audience spellbound. That's my opinion. I was spellbound for over an hour as he described the circumstances occurring in this country dating back to the 1980s that led to the perfect storm we now know as the opioid epidemic. I bought his book and began to better understand the backstory, if you will, of the defendants that were coming before me. By 2017, what Quinones describes, and you'll hear him talk about it tonight, what he described as a mostly white suburban problem was now coming before me in 2017 in all races, faces, colors, classes, and ages. It was clearly no longer just a white problem. In fact, in 2017, the New York Times reported that the drug overdoses had risen dramatically among Black Americans between the ages of 45 to 64. Overdoses. It seemed to many people at that time, many people shared with me that they knew someone in their family or circle of friends who had somehow gotten addicted to their pain pills. By 2017, I had defendants who were using OxyContin in combination with oxycodone, in combination with hydrocodone, in addition to their Percocets, topped off with just a little bit of Xanax and a variety of different muscle relaxers. And they were using these all at the same time. Yes, some were young. Some of our young people who had mixed alcohol on top of all of these various medications and then drove were found passed out behind the wheel of their vehicles on our city roads and highways. And yes, people are driving. Please know that there are people driving every day next to you who are on a variety, a combination of these drugs. And they're right next to you in that lane. We hope that they don't pass out. Others were senior citizens who had become addicted to the pain pills that they were using before their doctors cut off their prescriptions. I surmise that these seniors, many of whom had never committed a crime in their lives, began stealing in Myers, in Kroger's, or other locations to pay for their street pills because they can no longer afford to buy them on their fixed incomes. These are the kinds of things that we were seeing in the court. Then, of course, there appeared to be as well middle-aged and young people that had just very quietly and quickly gone from pill addiction to heroin use. After a recent judicial conference, a colleague from another district court shared information with us at a conference that detailed a town hall that she had given in her jurisdiction. Judges are encouraged to take the lead in educating our communities and bringing information to the citizens. It's my personal beliefs that judges should step off the benches more often and into the communities in which we serve. So I knew it was time to do something and take some kind of action here in this district. I suggested, or as suggested, as was suggested to me by my colleague, I contacted the local Families Against Narcotics chapter. Didn't know anyone in that chapter, but contacted them, reached out to help to organize an event with fire, police, other city officials. Of course, the city of Southfield, which is the center of it all, is presenting this program tonight, so here we are. Tonight you will hear from local fire, who will tell you what they are seeing in the field. You will hear from our local police agencies, who will highlight recent initiatives such as Hope Without Handcuffs, and they'll tell you what that means. Oakland County officials are here to address the initiatives developed to reduce overdoses pre- and post-release from the county jail. Maybe something that you might not have thought about. Attorney Bart Bernstein will describe and explain the litigation across the state and across the country, quite frankly, against pharmaceutical companies, distributors, and retail pharmacies throughout Michigan. This town hall will also feature that video clip, courtesy of Sam Quinones, from his riveting Groves High School presentation. So you're in for a treat. You'll get an opportunity tonight to hear his opinion and his explanation as to how this all came about. Now, we know that many families are experiencing overdoses by family members. Tonight, members of the public attending this town hall will have an opportunity to receive a free Narcan kit with on-site training at the end of the presentation with training by the fire department. And these are the kits that will reverse an overdose. This will be, as I understand it, and I'm sure someone on this panel will correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, this will be the first time that there is a public distribution of Narcan kits in Oakland County at an event such as this. Although these kits are carried by the fire and police units, family members can literally save the life of a loved one while waiting for the first responders to arrive. These kits have been obtained for public distribution by a grant given to the Alliance of Coalition for Healthy Communities, ACHC, so you're in for a full evening. At this time, I'd like to just start the program by introducing two of our elected officials on the panel tonight, Commissioner Janet Jackson and State Representative Jeremy Moss. The three of us met months ago to plan what you will see and hear tonight. Both have seen the impact of this issue in their respective professions as well. Oakland County Commissioner Janet Jackson of the 21st District is on the County Commission. She represents portions of Southfield and Farmington Hills. Commissioner Jackson is currently a member of the Oakland County Gun Violence Study and the Human Trafficking Task Force of Oakland County. Commissioner Jackson believes that opioids are now killing as many people as firearms, and there are statistics that bear that out, and that the opioid problem has fueled an increase in human trafficking activity. Commissioner Jackson.
Good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank Judge DEBRA Nance for the vision of holding this program this evening and doing the hard work. And thank you. And all of the other people on the panel tonight that will be speaking on this crisis. Just by the number of people in this room is indicative of the seriousness of this problem. And I'm sure that this has touched people in various ways, just like it has me. In my lifetime, as a young girl, several of my family members died of drug overdoses. We know this is not the first time this plague has been around. And so I'm blessed to be in a position to help address and fight it. The opioid epidemic is one of our most pressing health issues today. This crisis is affecting vast numbers of people in our community and country. On the average, 115 Americans die every day from an overdose. Around 66% of the drug overdoses in 2016 involved an opioid, including prescription drugs and illegal opioids like heroin and fentanyl. This rate was 5 times higher than it was in 1999. However, more than 40% of these deaths in 2016 involved a prescription opioid. On March 1st of this year, there was a White House summit including the National Association of County Officials, one of our local governing and lobbying, one of our national local lobbying boards, convened to address this issue on a national level. The federal government announced its intent to file a lawsuit against the manufacturers of opioid-based painkillers, as local counties were also filing their own lawsuits. These suits against pharmaceutical companies addressed unfair trade, racketeering, and fraud. Oakland County joined Wayne County in October 2018, and in December 2018, Macomb County, along with 9 other municipalities, also became part of these lawsuits. This action was taken to change behavior on the part of painkiller manufacturers for the role they have had in fueling this crisis. Here in Oakland County, so many opioid prescriptions were written in 2016. Every single resident, every man, woman, and child could have had 45 pills. That equals more than 55 million pills prescribed in Oakland County alone. In 2016, 165 Oakland County residents died from opioid-related causes. The average age was 42 years old, 70% male, 82% white. In Southfield, there were 12 deaths, 92% male. Human trafficking combined with opioid abuse has also been reported in southern Oakland County and Southfield. This is a very great concern of mine because I sit on the Oakland County Human Trafficking Task Force. 4 people were arrested at a Southfield hotel in August of last year. The arrest resulted from a tip that one of the individuals was using rooms at the hotel to conduct a drug and human trafficking operation. See, the traffickers use drugs to prey on victims by controlling them and holding them hostage through feeding their opioid addictions. This case was solved by the FBI Oakland County Gang and Violent Crimes Task Force in conjunction with our Southfield Police Department. Yes. I'm so very proud of the work that our local police department takes on in fighting and combating this crime. And Chief Eric Hawkins, I'm just grateful that you're our law enforcement leader. Oakland County is also fighting this plague in other ways. Our health division launched an open data portal with informative data and resources for prevention, treatment, and recovery. The website address, I'm going to give you a bit of information if you want to take this down, is www.oakgov.com/prescription drugs. That's www.oakgov.com/prescription drugs. This website will highlight awareness campaigns, target programs, and treatment services, especially in high-risk areas where large numbers of prescription drug use is identified. In our county jail, the Community Health Network is partnering with the Sheriff's Office to provide medication-assisted treatment, behavioral health, and best practice medications to reduce negative withdrawal effects and the desire to abuse and relapse. Public trainings for the use of Narcan and naloxone, thank you, which we're going to have tonight at this event, which is an opioid antidote used to block effects of the drug, are being held throughout the county. This service is provided to help save lives in case of an emergency opioid overdose and was advocated for use by the Oakland County Commission, which I'm a member of the board. As we recognize that this crisis is increasingly affecting all races and demographics in our community, approaches to assist are now varied and are more treatment-based than the past efforts of the national war on drugs during the crack cocaine epidemic. There can no longer be a racial divide or disparity in treatment or consequences. We all must be diligent and not react mainly with the punitive criminal justice policies that can cause mass incarceration of non-violent users. The current expansion of awareness, prevention, and access to addiction treatment universally integrated into our health care and criminal justice system is a must. These actions must be implemented fairly to address the crisis in an equitable way to best treat all people, especially in a minority-majority community like Southfield. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Commissioner. Next, I'd like to introduce you to State Rep Jeremy Moss, who is in his second term representing Michigan's 35th District House, which comprises the 46th District, Southfield, Lathrop, Beverly, Bingham, and Franklin. He serves as the Democratic Vice Chairman of the House Regulatory Reform Committee, a member of the House Elections and Ethics Committee, and the Local Government Committee. Before joining the legislature, Moss served as the youngest member ever elected to the Southfield City Council and worked in public policy at the state and local levels. Rep. Moss, your thoughts briefly?
Thank you, Judge Nance. And I'm so incredibly touched by the turnout for this event. I mean, look around the room. This is clearly an issue that we need to address in every community in this state. So I represent the 35th District in the Michigan House of Representatives, which, as the judge said, is based here in southern Oakland County, and you know I serve with members of every other district throughout the state. And I can tell you that this crisis has touched every corner of the state of Michigan. It hasn't discriminated against a single community. And everybody that I work with is working diligently across the aisle, Republicans and Democrats alike, Northern Michigan representatives, Southwestern Michigan representatives, and right here in Southeastern Michigan to address this crisis, which is happening and it's pervasive all across the state. So my first year in the legislature, in June of 2015, the governor actually appointed a commission, a bipartisan commission to address this crisis and make policy recommendations on a state level to figure out where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Because as the judge was mentioning, she sees it in her courtroom, and it's becoming a huge issue in courtrooms all across the state. It's a social issue, it's a criminal justice issue, it's a cost issue. It's a cost issue to families, it's a cost issue to municipalities, it's a cost issue to our police department and fire department that has to expend resources. When we'd rather tackle it on the front end and save the cost, the human toll and the fiscal cost that it's impacting on our communities. So the governor created this bipartisan task force to address the growing prescription drug and opioid problem here in Michigan. The task force was comprised of Republican and Democratic officials, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and other stakeholders representing state government, medicine, law enforcement, and the judiciary. And the stated mission of this task force was to examine the recent trends in prescription drug and opioid abuse, evaluate strategic options to move forward, and develop a statewide plan action by the fall of 2015. So this task force met throughout the course of the summer of 2015 and made to the legislature in the fall of 2015 25 primary recommendations and 7 contingent recommendations in the areas of prevention, treatment, regulation, and outcomes and enforcement. So among these recommendations that came out of this task force in 2015 were some broad ones and some specific ones. And I'll read some of them to you, and then I'll talk about what we've actually done legislatively that is now law here in the state of Michigan. First was updating and replacing the Michigan Automated Prescription System. The acronym for that is MAPS. Some of you, if you're in the medical field, obviously know what MAPS is. It's a way for medical professionals to coordinate prescription drug outtake. Providing easier access to drugs that reduce the effects of an opioid overdose, like naloxone. To limit criminal penalties for low-level offenses for those who seek medical assistance while or after or during an overdose. Requiring additional training for professionals who prescribe controlled substances. Increasing the number of addiction specialists practicing here in Michigan. Reviewing programs to eliminate doctor and pharmacy shopping, and requiring bona fide doctor-patient relationships for prescribing controlled substances. Creating a public awareness campaign about the dangers of prescription drug use and abuse and how people can get help for themselves or family members. I think we're fulfilling that part of the task force right here today. Increasing training for law enforcement in recognizing and dealing with addiction for those officers who do not directly deal with narcotics regularly. And I'm sure that our public safety personnel will talk about what they're doing in their respective departments. So much of the legislation that has been proposed has been introduced, and much of the legislation that has been introduced has been enacted into law. So we have enacted a series of bills. My legislative director, Jason Hoskins, is here. We have a flyer not only available in the front, but Jason can pass around a few copies here. So we have extras out there. It will detail all of the bills that have passed and are now law here in Michigan from that 2015 task force report to today to deal with this crisis in our communities. Much of this legislation passed unanimously. It seems like Lansing can't get its act together to fix the roads, but at least, you know, we'd see this as an issue where there is bipartisan support to provide solutions, because whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, we're all seeing this in our communities. So among the bills that have been enacted into law include House Bill 4403, which allows eligible Medicaid individuals to receive medically necessary detox services and substance use disorder residential treatment for opioid addiction. We also have required the governor to create a prescription drug and opioid abuse commission to create guidance on the instruction of students on opioid drug abuse for the Michigan Department of Education. We are trying to get in our classrooms and make sure that there's knowledge at a young age about what is this crisis, what is addiction, and what should you know as a young person moving forward when getting medical treatment. We also we are requiring a prescriber to discuss certain issues relating to opioids and obtain a signed parental consent form before issuing the first prescription to a minor in a single course of treatment for a controlled substance containing an opioid. We also passed a law that dealt with the doctor-patient relationship to require licensed prescribers to have a bona fide prescriber-patient relationship before prescribing a patient a Schedule 2 to 5 controlled substance. We want to make sure that we are preventing as much as possible this doctor shopping. If you can't get it here, can you get it here? If you can't get it here, can you get it here? We also have strengthened the MAPS system, which was the first recommendation out of this task force, to require licensed prescribers to obtain and review a report concerning a patient from MAPS before prescribing and dispensing a controlled substance to that patient. And then we also are giving some more tools to our pharmacists who prescribe this and see this continual problem in and out of their stores and in and out of their counters, and we would allow a pharmacist to fill a prescription in increments for a controlled substance in certain incidences. If a prescriber is treating a person for acute pain, the prescriber may only prescribe a 7-day opioid prescription or less within a 7-day period. There is a lot of work left to do. This is not, clearly, this work is not going to solve the crisis overnight. It is a first step of many, which I know that our panel will discuss further solutions that I will be in charge of pushing forward in Lansing, and I know that our county official and our judge here will be working hand in hand with us to make possible. A few of them that have been proposed but have not been acted upon yet include House Bill 4404, which would define and regulate these pain management facilities, and the intent of the bill is to address clinics that operate as pill mills. Another bill that has been proposed that we're looking to see some movement on is to require the Department of Health and Human Services to develop a universal state non-opioid directive form for individuals to refuse being administered or prescribe opioids, to give people the power to have a form that they have filled out to prevent them from being susceptible to being prescribed or being offered or being suggested opioids when maybe they're at a vulnerable state and know otherwise that they really cannot handle that prescription. And then finally, and I know that our police department and fire department will like this or want to weigh in on this, to remove the October 2017 sunset so that all life support vehicles dispatched must be equipped with opioid antagonist going forward. So we have a lot of work to do. We are doing it. And I'm so proud to be a part of this panel discussion because this addiction knows no boundaries. It knows no household income. It knows no racial disparities. It happens in our rural communities. It happens in our urban communities. And if we can start here in our suburban community of Southfield to have that conversation here in our own backyard and impact our surrounding communities, we're doing a service to those who need help. Because that's the ultimate goal of this legislation and our policy initiatives, to help people to lead productive and healthy lives and manage this crisis that is happening in our community. So I want to thank Judge Nance for gathering this panel together, and I'm looking forward to a very robust discussion touching on every topic we can possibly hit on during the time allotted to address the crisis and address your concerns. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, State Rep Moss, and that's what we're doing. Those are the initiatives that have to be in play. One of the items that you just mentioned was the 7-day prescription issue. I was just talking to a law enforcement officer just a week ago about this town hall tonight, and he relayed to me, a law enforcement officer, that his 16-year-old son had just gone in 6 months ago to have molars removed. There was a possibility that the wisdom tooth were coming in and that kind of issue, and that he left the dentist's office just 6 months ago with a 30-day prescription of oxycodone for his 16-year-old. He said he never told his son that he had it. He and his wife decided to give him a few Motrin, and it'll wear off in a few days, and that's indeed what happened. Had the 16-year-old quite possibly gotten that 30-day supply of oxycodone, these are the kind of things that are being handed out
right.
in high schools to other students at pill parties. Who knows what would have happened in terms of a person becoming addicted within 30 days of having that prescription. So I'm happy to hear about that kind of legislation. As a judge, I certainly understand the transition from prescribed medication to street pharmaceuticals to hardcore heroin and cocaine use. However, Sam Quinones, author of Dreamland, again, his book is The True Tale of the American Opiate Epidemic, will take us on a journey that describes how and why, in his humble opinion and research, this could occur in our country. His explanation is fascinating. Next, you will see and hear a shortened version of the Quinones presentation. So for the sake of time, again, his presentation was over an hour and 20 minutes. We have just given you a capsule of it tonight. We're going to start at a portion into the video and stop before the end, but I will catch you up on where the author is in this presentation. Quinones, again, is an author and an investigative reporter. He starts by explaining that in 2007 and through 2009, he was living and writing books in Mexico. He had been asked to cover a story about drug trafficking. He became attracted to a story about 12 deaths in Virginia due to a drug overdose caused by black tar heroin. Because he had always thought, he relays, that drug trafficking was violent and only occurred in urban cities, he had never, he says, heard of black tar heroin. He contacted a couple of DEA agents to find out what black tar heroin was doing in Virginia. So this is where the video picks up.
So I'm investigating this problem in Huntington. Black tar heroin, I knew from my years in Stockton, never crossed the Mississippi River. It was really just a West Coast phenomenon, western side of the United States. So my question was, I looked up West Virginia. I found there was no Mexicans in West Virginia. It's less than 1%. It's the lowest percentage of foreign-born people of any state in the United States. So what was black tar heroin made in Mexico doing in Huntington, West Virginia, a state that had no Mexicans and really that I did not associate with heroin in the least? What was it doing in quantities large enough to kill 12 people in 6 months and overdose many, many more, except for that EMS learned, the paramedics learned how to save these folks? It was a question that bothered me. I called up Huntington PD. Huntington PD says all that stuff, we remember that very well, when it was a terrible time. All that stuff was coming from Columbus. You got to call there. They'll tell you all about it. I called DEA in Columbus, and there I met a DEA agent who was particularly upset. Really great to get DEA agents when they're upset. As a reporter, I've had a number of encounters with DEA agents. Some are wonderful, some are not so wonderful. But when you get them when they're upset and they're mad and it's a great moment. And this guy was mad. He had been in Columbus, Ohio for 10 years. He said, we had no heroin 10 years ago. None. Then we began to notice a strange thing began to happen. We began to see all these Mexican kids driving around town with their mouths full of little balloons, tiny little balloons of 1/10 of a gram doses of black tar heroin, like chipmunks. They had a big bottle of water next to them, so in case the cops pull them over, they swig it down, they swallow it. They never used guns. They paid their drivers. This was a retail system that sold heroin like pizza. So the addict would call a number, which would circulate through the addict community in Columbus, very well known, several numbers, by that point. The operator standing by to take your order, the operator would take the order, would dispatch one of these drivers with the balloons in his mouth, and the driver would meet the addict at, say, a Burger King parking lot or someplace like that. They'd do a kind of a binational drug deal, and they'd each be on their way. This business operated from 7 in the morning to 7 at night. It was a business. It was a real, well thought out franchise kind of business that sold retail heroin like pizza. He said several other things that amazed me as well. First of all, he said, there are no guns. This broke my paradigm of all drug trafficking kind of being related to you win market share by killing your rival. They dress low profile. They have old cars. They look like they're day workers in front of a Home Depot. Then he said something that just kind of changed my life, actually to this day. And he said, you know, crazy thing is, they're all from one town. Now, I had lived in Mexico for a long time, and I knew that this was possible. I knew, all across Mexico, you have towns where everybody does the same job. An entire town of construction workers, for example. The reason for that is, in Mexico, access to education is not sufficient enough to allow readily for a peasant farmer's son to become a lawyer or a doctor or a mechanical engineer. So you learn, and from these communities, you learn your job from everybody around you, your uncle, your brother-in-law, what have you, and you have these examples all across. The biggest example, really, is just immigrant villages, where one guy goes to Dallas and becomes a restaurant worker. Pretty soon the entire town's in Dallas working in restaurants. This happens all in my first book, there was a town that I wrote about where everybody made popsicles. One of the great business models, one of the great business stories, in my opinion, in Mexico is how a town became the wealthiest, really about the wealthiest village I ever saw in Mexico, was this town where everybody had popsicle businesses all over Mexico. It was a beautiful story of how people could rise into the middle class without selling drugs, without coming here illegally, and stay in Mexico. You know that this town, by the way, has this, you get there, and in front of the town is a two-story, about the size of this screen here, a two-story concrete popsicle in honor of the there are other towns, for example, though, where everybody, a story that I really want to do, aching to do, is a story about these towns in near Mexico City, where everybody in the town is a pimp. They all pimp, seduce kind of country girls and pimp them first to Mexico City, but a while back they discovered Queens, New York. And this has perverted that town irretrievably, in my opinion. Been there several times. It's a nasty little town. But the point is that in Mexico, I knew that there was a very great possibility when he told me that there was a small town in Mexico where everybody came here to retail heroin like pizza in Columbus, Ohio. And I thought that is a great story, right? I say, which town is it? He tells me that, and I kind of I'm like all of a sudden really aware, really focused. What town is that, sir? He gets on the phone with gets off the phone, talks to this case agent. The case agent comes, he gets back on the phone, he tells me, Tepic. Right there, I knew he was wrong. Tepic, Nayarit. Tepic is the capital of the state of Nayarit. Nayarit's a very small state south of Arizona, about 12, 15 hours. Tepic is a town of about 350,000 people, and right there, I knew that this kind of system, where everybody does the same job, that does not happen in big cities in Mexico. It only happens in small towns. And I was kind of consumed by the idea that somewhere out there in Mexico, there was a small town where everybody came here to Columbus to traffic heroin like pizza. He told me another thing. He said, we have arrested these guys till we're blue in the face. It's very frustrating. We'll do a month-long investigation, arrest these guys, and a week later, 2 days later sometimes, they'll have a replacement. Driving around, same crew, same number, all that kind of stuff. The crew will reconstitute itself very quickly. An inexhaustible supply of labor is what is the foundation of this. Excuse me. So I said, they arrested many of these guys, and I said, can you give me some names? He gave me a long list, indictments, so he sent them all to him. He says, yeah, these are the guys. They're all in prison. Most of them are in prison. I looked them up on the Federal Bureau of Prison website, and I sent letters to all of them, like 20 or so guys. I sit around for about a month thinking this is going to be such a great story, and I hear nothing. Zero. Complete silence. And I'm figuring, oh, well, it was a great idea, but maybe I'm just going to go on to my next story. Right? Until one day when one guy, out of the blue, bless his heart, calls me. He was an operator in one of these crews. They had sold black tar heroin to a girl who had died. The investigators had followed the trail back to this crew, arrested him. He was doing 15 years in prison, wasn't too happy about it. He's the one who tells me, gets me going on this story. He says, yep, we are not from Tepic. We're from a small little town named Jalisco. Jalisco, Nayarit. I've been in Mexico 10 years, never heard of Jalisco, Nayarit. It's a weird name because Jalisco, if you know Mexico, there's a big state. Jalisco is the state where Guadalajara is located. It doesn't sound right. Jalisco, Nayarit sounds like Texas, Arkansas, or something like that. And I said to him, what are you talking, he understood that my confusion. He said, no, look on the map, and I was looking on the map by this point, and sure enough, south of near Tepic is a town called Jalisco, Nayarit, tiny little town, 20,000 people in the county, about 45,000 people. And he said, here's what happened. In the 1980s, some of the families, a bunch of families had moved by then to the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles. A few of those families had learned how to cook opium goo, the opium from the poppy, which grows very nicely by peasant farmers up in the mountains of Mexico, had learned to cook that into black tar heroin. They began selling this in San Fernando Valley, at first chipping off little pieces in parks. As time goes on, more and more of these guys begin to come up from the town, but of course they can't kill each other. They can't deal with a competition the way, say, another group might, because they all know each other. Everybody knows where everybody's mother lives. So instead they just kind of tolerate more and more competition, more and more. What ends up happening is cops begin to arrest them. Also, the Latino street gangs in LA devise a new business model, which still exists, by the way, of taxing stationary drug dealers. If you're in a house or you're in a street corner, they're going to tax you. And they're going to funnel that money through the gang. So in order to avoid the cops, in order to expand their market, and in order to avoid the Latino street gangs, they go to cars. They go to beepers first to get in cut, they'll beep them, the driver goes to the payphone, calls back, yeah, take the dope over to this guy's place. That's how it works at first, then Cricket, Nextel phones, then finally, of course, today's cell phones, obviously. But in time, they begin, like any capitalist enterprise, they begin to expand, seeking more profits, because they cannot kill each other. So they can't stay where they are, so they have to expand. The first places they go, Portland, they go to San Diego, they go to Reno, Honolulu, places like this. At one point I asked them, well, when do they go to New York? Because I'd grown up in the 70s and I'd seen those movies. I figured every heroin dealer wanted to go to New York. They don't go to New York, they're afraid of New York. They're afraid of entrenched street gangs. They're afraid of Chicago, Detroit. They don't go there. They go to places where there's no competition, where there's no gangs. One of these things that they're all farm boys. They're not cartel killers. They're guys who see this as a way of just moving ahead. Excuse me. He told me they began to expand in the early 1990s, and the reason they began to expand was because, as the DEA agent had said, they found an inexhaustible supply of labor, and the way they did that was showing people what heroin could do for them. In every town in Mexico, I'll just back up a little bit, and every time you go to every immigrant village in Mexico, what you will see, if you go there, is part of the skyline of every town is rebar. Rebar sticking out of the first story of the house. The reason for that is a couple-fold, but one of them is, again, Mexican immigrants do not have, or poor working class Mexicans do not have access to loans sufficient to build a house all at once. So people come here, they make their dollars, they send their money back, and they build their houses piecemeal over 6, 8, 10 years. When they get done with the first floor, they say, I'm not done. I want a second story, because everybody around them is building. So they put that rebar up. Everywhere you go in Mexico, where it's an immigrant village, people are up here, you will see rebar. I saw it in dozens of villages everywhere. I got used to it. The only place I did not see it was in Jalisco, Nayarit, when I went down there in the summer of 2009 investigating this story. And the reason for that is heroin provided the capital. There were no loans. Heroin provided the capital to be able to build a house in 9 months instead of 9 years. People had nice lines to their houses. They would build wrought iron. They build in garage door openers, which no one had ever seen before. It was this radical, almost a recruiting poster. The first houses that began to be built by these guys, all of a sudden, people were raising their hands all across town. I'll do that. I'll do that. Sure. The guys would come home. They would have lots of money. They'd stand in the plaza and buy beer for all their newfound friends. Kids who would watch this would say, I'll do that. I want to do that. I want to be the big man. The girls would be flocking to them. That was a narcotic themselves. The other thing that they discovered, which was a very weird realization I came to midway through this story, was they began to figure out that this pizza system of selling heroin was a perfect system for transforming very, very cheap black tar heroin into stacks of Levi's 501 jeans. Levi's 501 jeans in the 1990s, when the expansion of this system was really underway, were the gold standard, really. I remember I was in Mexico at the time. Everybody wanted Levi's 501s. It was the thing to have in rural Mexico. Very, very prestigious to have. This system could turn this little piece of heroin into black tar into a big, a pair of Levi's 501s, because the dealers realized that the addicts that they were dealing with were fantastic shoplifters. You could give them a long list: blue, white, this size, this color, and they would come back. They would clean out JCPenney's or Mervyn's or Sears or Target. And they would come, and these guys began to develop big stacks of these jeans. I remember talking to one guy who remembers his first time. His uncles are dealers. He comes up from the village. They take him to this apartment, and in this apartment where he's going to live is they open the closet, and there before him is like stacks of Levi's 501s. It's like in the movies where the sun breaks through the clouds and the angels start singing. For him, it was like, oh my God, I've never seen anything so beautiful in all my life. These guys start going home with these jeans and giving them out like Santa Claus. People who have them are the envy of every other man in town. And pretty soon, guys who are in their cheap Mexican jeans and no girl will talk to are saying, I'll do that. And so as time went on, this is how heroin changed this town. We talk about how heroin changes America. Heroin is changing towns back in Mexico as well. And this one town is a particularly acute example of it. As they did this, they began to expand to around the West Coast. Portland, Reno, Albuquerque, Denver, Seattle, various places like that. But as they were doing it, it's really important what the time period when they're doing this. They are doing this in a time period when there was a stagnant number of addicts. Not like today, right? Everywhere they go, it's just a certain number of people, and a lot of those people are tapped out. So if you come to town looking for a new market and you know somebody from your town's already there working it, how do you take clients from them? You can't kill them. They begin to develop masterful ways of discounting, branding, marketing. They begin to offer people 10 free balloons if you bring me 3 new clients. You buy a hit from me every day. For 6 days, I give you a free one on Sunday. They begin to hand it out in front of methadone clinics, numbers and dope in front of methadone clinics, because that's where the addicts are. Doesn't matter if people are actually trying to kick. That's where the addicts are. They become master marketers. This was a story that kind of consumed me for a while. I was just like amazed at all the little permutations of this story. But I still had the question that I started with of why would they have any market at all for their heroin in West Virginia? I never thought of West Virginia as a heroin market. I had never heard of heroin in West Virginia, even though I didn't know much about the state. I was certain I'd never heard of heroin there. And that's when I realized the other part, the larger part to this story, which was that, frankly, the Jalisco boys, as I grew to call them, would really have been a cool story, but only a minor thing, had it not been for another major change in American culture and society. A revolution, really, in American medicine that was taking place at that very moment as they were expanding. Like most revolutions, it happens for what you could believe to be good reason. For many, many years in this country, doctors would not prescribe opiate painkillers for any reason, only under the most strict supervision. People would be dying of cancer, 3 months to live, they still, agony, horrible pain, they still would not get these painkillers. In the 1980s, a nationwide, but small, but nationwide group of doctors, young Turks kind of, began to develop to question this. Why don't we prescribe these pills? These pills are easy, they're here, they're cheap. And these people are in utter pain, why aren't we prescribing them for dying cancer patients? It was absolutely correct. It was indecent the way people were being treated in many cases because doctors were afraid of them getting addicted. But what did it matter if they were addicted for the last 3 months of their life? They were going to die anyway. Better to have them live in their last 3 months in some kind of comfort. That was the argument. This group of young Turk doctors from around the country gains a kind of a collective conscience. Everybody gets to know each other, and they begin to argue for a vastly more liberalized use of opiate painkillers. First, to treat dying cancer patients. And they win that argument. That's a kind of an easy argument for them to win. That argument is won by the early 1990s. People accept, yeah, actually that was a stupid idea. This is a good a tool for dying cancer, palliative care, hospice care, etc. But like many revolutions, it doesn't stop there. The pendulum begins to swing, and it keeps going, right? And so they begin to argue, you know what, we should use these pills for other things as well, chronic pain. They began to believe that these pills, and they began to argue that these pills, Vicodin, Percocet, later OxyContin, were virtually non-addictive when used to treat pain. Sometimes they were. Some people had no bad reaction. Others eventually would, but they didn't talk in terms of nuance. They didn't talk in terms of, say, you try to figure out who is who. They thought, we are all about trying to liberalize. Society is dead set against us. We have to break down that wall. And so that does not lead much room for nuance. And they began to argue without any evidence at all that these pills could be used to treat pain and would be virtually non-addictive. That was the buzz phrase. Less than 1% of all people treated get addicted. That's what they began to convince doctors of. At the same time, though, there were other things happening in America that allowed this, I believe, to happen. People became convinced, largely because of the urgings of these pain specialists, that we were a country with a pain epidemic, that we needed to very aggressively treat, and we were not doing so. As part of that, it became accepted in modern medicine that pain is the fifth vital sign, that we should treat it as if it were like a pulse. The problem is, of course, pain is not a vital sign. You cannot measure it objectively with machines every day and day in, day out. It's very subjective according to your idea of what is a bad pain is very different from mine. We had a patients' rights movement that in its time was probably a worthwhile thing, but it too becomes kind of perverted. Patients now are the idea became pain is what a patient says it is, and the doctor therefore has to kind of obey the patient. The doctor's clinical experience is discounted a little bit, right? There were doctor evaluations in which patients were then allowed to tell the doctor or the doctor's supervisors how well the doctor did. Now, this probably had some good initial reason for it, but it became also perverted as this revolution in pain medicine using opiate painkillers became more and more intense. And soon it became a way of extorting pain pills out of doctors. If you don't give me a good pain, the pills that I'm looking for, I'm going to write you a bad evaluation. And you'll lose your hospital privileges, or the practice will fire you, or something like that. At the same time, in America, we had just won the Cold War. There was, I believe, a time when people were feeling like they don't want to be bothered with the problems of the world. We won. We're entitled to a life free of pain, a life without pain. Never had happened in the history of mankind, but now we felt we were entitled to it. As part of that, there was also kind of a fear of pain. We were a country where people had walked across, in Conestoga wagons, walked across the high plains, and today we're just like became terrified of pain. We had to treat it, not just treat it, but treat it massively. At the same time, I believe, there grew up an attitude that doctors ought to be required to fix us. They were like car mechanics, we were cars. They were supposed to do their magic and fix us. And by the way, we were not going to participate too much in our own wellness. If they said, well, part of your problem is that you're overweight and you need to stop eating chips and you need to walk more, that was not what we were going to do. We wanted that quick fix. Pills fit that whole social context perfectly. At the same time, insurance companies are cutting back on what they'll reimburse for. The doctors are left with fewer tools than ever on how to treat pain, and the pills become the answer. One answer to a very, very complicated topic that is varied according to person and according to kind of pain, where it is, what causes it, all of that kind of stuff. In 1996, Purdue Pharma, the company that makes OxyContin, comes out with the pill, OxyContin. OxyContin, you may know, is really an old drug, oxycodone, developed in 1916, but the innovation is that it's wrapped in a coating, time-release coating, so you now can take 2 pills a day instead of with Vicodin or Percocet, 8 or 10 or 12. That's not a trivial thing. Taking 2 pills a day for pain patients is a great thing. You don't have to be taking them every 2 hours. You get your life back a little bit. It was viewed by the pain specialists, by the pain revolutionaries, as this great innovation in American medicine, a fantastic new way of treating pain. It was also, though, a game changer in another way. It was the first time that an opiate painkiller was marketed to doctors as if it were over-the-counter medicine. It was allowed to be marketed for the first 6 or 8 years of its life, first 6 years really of its life, as if you were marketing just almost any other kind of drug. So Purdue developed a marketing campaign that involved hats with OxyContin and phone pads and doctor visits. The idea was get to know your doctor personally. This was the time also when pharmaceutical companies, all companies, were developing massive sales force. It was sales force arms race. Early 90s, there was 35,000 pharmaceutical sales reps in the United States. By 2003, there was 120,000. Purdue markets OxyContin in this context as well. Visit the doctors, just like the Jalisco boys. Visit your guy, get to know your guy. Sell them on the idea that this is the drug you start with and stay with. That was the motto. That was the slogan. Very much like the Jalisco boys try to get, hey, stick with us. Here's my number. Stick with us. Convenience. We're solving doctors' problems by making sure that we're curing their most problematic patients, pain patients. And they sold it all to doctors based on the idea that these pills were virtually non-addictive when used to treat pain. In time, this revolution, pharmaceutical companies, American society and the pain specialists all kind of combine, create this revolution, and soon these pills by the mid-1990s to late 1990s are being prescribed for all manner of ailments and surgeries and just things that they had never been prescribed for before. Wisdom tooth extraction, sports injuries, chronic pain, post-surgery. They are also, very importantly, massively prescribed when they are. So it's not like you're getting 4 pills. You're getting 60, and you're getting those that to take home with you when you leave the hospital. Complete change in how things are done. One of the first places it hits is in a place we're all used to ignoring, Appalachia. The town I spent most time in, really, the town of Portsmouth, Ohio, on the Ohio River, right across from Kentucky. Portsmouth is far away from here, but in many ways, I think it's right around the corner. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. Portsmouth was a all-American town, selected as an all-American town in 1979, 1980. It had steel mill, it had shoe factories bustling downtown, 50,000 people, and at the center of the town was this glorious, enormous, football field-sized swimming pool, around which life itself, the community kind of existed, growing out of this swimming pool. Parents would leave their kids at the pool as a babysitter virtually all summer. You grew up being watched by hundreds of parents. It was an egalitarian place. Everybody looked the same in swimming trunks. And there always seemed to be more. There was the owner of the pool also owned a shoe factory. He didn't need money from the pool, so he reinvested it, and he kept on buying more land and more land all around the pool. You would grow up in this pool. The name of this pool was Dreamland. When you were 3, you would be in the toddler section. By the time you were in middle school, you would be in the middle part of the pool. High school, you'd be jumping off the diving board. After high school, you lose your virginity out in the extensive fields around the pool, and your kids would start right there, back there in the toddler where you did 20, 30 years before. A classic Rust Belt town, though, in 1980, the steel mill closes, the shoe factories are dying. With that, Main Street begins to fall apart, it empties out, half the population leaves, and in 1993, with not enough people to support it, Dreamland closes. It's plowed up and turned into today a vast sea of asphalt housing only a Chinese restaurant and an O'Reilly's auto parts store. With the loss of Dreamland, Portsmouth lost something essential, something crucial, something primordial to its soul as a community. It became completely defenseless against opiates, which were then, at that point, being marketed very heavily in the area at which it is really the center. Columbus to the north, eastern Kentucky, Cincinnati over here, West Virginia over there. At the center is Portsmouth. It gets huge amounts of Purdue promotion, and in time, it becomes the place where the pill mill is invented. The father of the pill mill is a doctor in Portsmouth, Ohio. Figures out that if you sell prescriptions to these pills, that can keep your clinic humming. And sure enough, he begins to do that. It's $250 a pop, no insurance accepted, only cash. You got to come in every month, because you can't call it in. You've got to be there personally. Long lines out the door. People coming from counties, sometimes states farther away. People in pajamas, because eventually they're all addicted. They don't care what they look like. They just want to get their pills. People ordering pizza in line. People fighting in line. Portsmouth, over the next decade, becomes the pill mill capital of America. There's a dozen pill mills in the town, 20,000. 70,000 people in the county, 9 million pills are prescribed every year. A whole generation An entire generation, and actually more than the generation, not just the young kids, a whole generation, including a lot of the middle-class folks in Portsmouth, get addicted to opiate painkillers. In time, it becomes kind of like the extreme version of the pain revolution. Pills everywhere. In time, Portsmouth develops an OxyContin, what's called an OxyContin economy. You can buy anything for about a decade in Portsmouth without any cash at all. All you needed was pills. You could buy cable TV service, dental appointments, cars, refrigerators, T-bone steaks, children's shoes, didn't matter. Everything. Cash had no value. People would rob you, they wouldn't leave your money there, and they'd take your pills. At the center of all this, the fountain this OxyContin economy, the central banks were the pill mills. The pills were particularly good currency because they were all denominated. 10 milligrams, 15 milligrams, 30, 40, 80, what have you. They didn't disintegrate very easily.
All right, that was a shocker. Mark, Christine Bonds, what did you get?
And we're going to continue from this point. If I can have your attention back, you're going to have to look Sam Quinones up on YouTube to find out, as he just said, what his theory is. That'll be on YouTube. We have cut it short just about 10 minutes because we actually started late and we want to keep on time. And at this time, I would like to introduce you, and I hope you found it fascinating. Did many of you find it fascinating to just to get his take and his rendition? As I shared with you, it's an hour and 20 minutes long. If you ever like to go back to do that, please watch the entire taping. Our county jails have also faced a dilemma. Sheriff Michael Bouchard, who is here with us tonight, has attended a number of workshops, and I'm going to take this just a little bit out of order because Sheriff Bouchard has some other commitments, but I did want him to speak with you. He's attended workshops, a number of them, on to assist opioid-addicted inmates. Here's the problem. It has been noted that there is a typical length of incarceration for about 2 weeks to 1 month. During that time period, it's just enough time for the inmates to fully detox, but not enough time for treatment. So when the user's tolerance to the opioid drug drops while incarcerated, with no treatment, they are then released and return to opioid use at about the same level as before incarceration. And if any of you know anybody who's on opioids, who's been in and out of the county jail, you know what I'm speaking of. As a result, there's typically an overdose. In fact, studies indicate that 2 weeks post-release, opioid addicts who are inmates are 129 times more likely to die than the general population of inmates who are not opioid addicts. Sheriff Bouchard has implemented a number of programs that he's here to speak to tonight. And Sheriff Bouchard, please step forward.
Thank you. I feel like the TV show or movie where they doctor, judge, commissioner. Well, thank you for allowing me to kind of change up. I was triple booked tonight, but I didn't want to miss this. And thanks to Judge Nance for the leadership on this critical topic. It's one that's affecting everybody. Overdose deaths are up about 300% over the last number of years, and we see it every day. Every day on my major pass along, I see a death or a save. We've saved 150 just at the sheriff's office using Narcan. So it is affecting every community, and appreciate your leadership on this. And to my partner on this, Chief Hawkins, we work closely. Where he has a problem, it's my problem, and if I have a problem, it's his problem. And we work extremely well, and thanks for all you do, and certainly the people you assigned to us. We run the narcotics enforcement team for the whole county, and you're gracious enough to assign people to that. And I see another partner in the audience here, Paul Walton from the prosecutor's office, and Jessica Cooper are also committed to this fight. So sorry for the preamble, but you deserve the kudos. Lots of programs are critically, I'm sure you're going to hear about Narcan that I just mentioned, but certainly the Vivitrol. We've been working on this program for quite some time because we want to put it in place so it's sustainable, so that there's follow-up and so that there's partnership with it. Law enforcement cannot arrest their way out of this crisis. It has to involve treatment, intervention, prevention, diversion, partnership with the judges, with community health. All of those things are integral. The Vivitrol program, as they exit the jail, which is basically an inhibitor, an opioid inhibitor. It's an injection that's under supervision. Hopefully, when they go back out, it gives them a chance to not fall right back into that pattern of behavior and die. Time and time again, we've seen people that we've saved with Narcan that we've had to save another time. So we need to see that kind of behavior interrupted. So we're proud to partner with Community Health, with the bench, to have a program to try to interrupt that behavior and give them a second chance at life. And I appreciate I saw a representative here earlier. I thought maybe buzzed out, but there's another piece of legislation that I think would be helpful, and I'll take this opportunity to pitch it. When we save a life on the street, cannot tell people who we saved or what happened. And oftentimes they go to the hospital, they get stabilized, let back out, then they go seek the next high. So we would like the ability to notify community health and the court so that intervention occurs. We don't want to take that person into custody, but we want to get them into treatment, into help, into intervention. I can't share that information, and it's frustrating because more than once we've had them go back out and overdose and die. So those kinds of programs are critically important, as well as a systemic approach. I know also we partner with Southfield Operation Medicine Cabinet to get opioids out of homes and out of the medicine cabinets of the homes. When you have an end-of-life situation, you have a tremendous amount of opioids in the home. When my brother passed, there was all sorts of morphine and other kinds of drugs in the home, and people struggle with, what do I do with it? Well, don't put it in the medicine cabinet, because that's the room in the house everyone has access to. Can I use your bathroom? And off they go sometimes with that out to the street, or they use it themselves. So get it out of the house, but take it to the medicine cabinets. There's 30-plus locations around the county. It's destroyed in an environmentally friendly way and doesn't affect our waterways, which it does if you flush it. So all of these programs have to play together to reduce the amount of opioids that are being diverted, to reduce the amount, as that video shows, that are being prescribed, and we're working with physicians. As you know, Oakland County actually sued opioid manufacturers to quit incentivizing prescribing opioids. It's a multi-layer onion, but the part that the judge asked me to speak to is the folks that come into jail are wrestling with this monkey on their back, and we don't want them to go back out and not just fall back into that behavior, but very possibly die. The heroin on the street today is much stronger than the heroin of yesteryear. And it's also adulterated. We're also seeing it adulterated with fentanyl and sometimes carfentanil. Just touching carfentanil can make you overdose. So we've actually had to change our protocol both in our crime lab and in the narcotics team on how they touch, handle, and investigate these cases, because narcotics officers have overdosed just being in the room with carfentanil. So this stuff is a killer, and it's affecting everybody. And the pathways are not the ones you typically see. That you have in your mind. It can come through a sports injury. Oral surgery is a huge path. I can't tell you how many kids have lost their lives because they got hooked during oral surgery. So, Judge, thanks for your leadership. We're a partner on every level. We're happy to do so. We also have launched a RIDE program at all of our substations, no questions asked to treatment. We got to work together, folks. We're losing people like crazy. My daughter played soccer not far from here, and was a pretty high-level soccer player. 3 of the girls she played soccer with are dead. They probably more than likely segued through sports injury, blew out a knee, got addicted to opioids during that process, and moved out into the higher drugs and are dead. So it affects every community, every walk of life, and we got to get a handle on this. We're losing too many treasures. So God bless you. Thanks for doing this and for being here.
Now, from some of the people who are seeing this issue firsthand, up close and personal in our community. Southfield Fire Chief Johnny Menifee took the helm of the Southfield Fire Department July of 2016. He has committed to serve the families, the residents, the guests, and business partners who live, work, and play in this community. Chief Menifee is equally committed to the men and women who serve and save those in need. When we first started to discuss this program, Chief Menifee also shared with me what not only his officers, his first responders were seeing, but the effects that it was having on his first responders. Chief Menifee.
Is the room locked?
Good evening. Let me apologize to Judge Nance for being late. I told her I wouldn't be late for this unless I had something else. So I had a really big fire with some hazardous materials, so I do apologize. Everyone's fine, everyone's okay, but I do apologize for being late. So what we're seeing in the fire department in the 46th district, so just to give you an update, in 2015 we had reported 59 cases that we, the first responders got called to. In 2016 there was 130, so it's a big jump there. In 2017 we saw 156. From the fire department, we felt kind of helpless. We were more on the reactive than proactive end of this, and it takes a mental and physical toll on my firefighters. You know, not only the patients but the firefighters, because they feel that they want to do more. So this was a great opportunity for us to come together and be more proactive. So Narcan, that's the big thing that most public safety departments have. I want to let you know that City of Southfield, Lathrop Village, Franklin, Bigham Farms, and Southfield Township, and Beverly Hills all have Narcan on their public safety rigs. So in case there is an emergency, everyone in the 46th district is covered to help a person with the emergencies. Now, just so we make sure we understand Narcan. Narcan is a narcotic blocker. It's a temporary reversal of that drug. It's, you know, it's not a fix. It's, you know, and we see a lot of individuals that we see them more than once. And so we thought about something that we can do. When you bring someone back from Narcan, is a very surreal experience for both parties. And we felt that we could take an opportunity to be more proactive with them. We have an opportunity to let an individual know how we care about them. The one thing that, from the numerous patients I've had, personally myself, is that they were afraid of the stigma that they were receiving from the healthcare workers, from their families, and from general citizens. So, you know, what we decided to do is reach out to them as, yes, we are confined to restraints with the HIPAA laws and so forth and can't release any information, so we start giving them the information. This is a great time when we bring them back that we can actually talk to them and have a personal conversation with each and every one of our residents that's having a trouble with this epidemic. So, you know, there are places like, you know, Drug-Free All-Stars is a great place that we've turned them on to the Turning Point Recovery Center. Now, these are no question asked, 24-hour places that they can go with individuals that have real life experiences like them with it. And those are great places. I believe it's also Brian's House or Brian's Hope. I'm not, Brian's Hope. There you go. Thanks, Captain. And there's a place that they can go and they can be, you know, not judged, and they can get some help. So our initiative is to change that stigma. That's what we're trying to do in the fire department, and I believe it's making a difference. Hopefully the numbers at the end of this year will prove that. But just, you know, everyone deserves to be valued. Everyone deserves to be not judged and given the benefit of the doubt. It's not the individual, it's the drug. Some of them can't help it and they need some more help. So what I would like for us to do, and what the men and women do on our fire department is, you know, they offer, you know, compassionate support. display kindness to the person, which is really good. Listen without judgment. You know, it's not them. It's the drug that we're fighting. See the person for who they are, not for the state they're in, right there. Educate. I mean, I had to get seriously educated as a fire chief about what my firefighters are being experienced and what they may bring home to their families. As I stated earlier, you know, just touching some of this stuff and what they're mixing and cutting some of this stuff with the carfentanyls and stuff is very serious. And you have to get educated. And I you know, challenge each and every one in this room to get educated on this, to learn more, you know, and follow it up with real statistics, not what you're hearing, you know, out there in the street, because there's a lot of great information out there. You know, if you treat everyone with the dependency with dignity and respect, I think we'll be a lot better off. Avoid those harmful labels. That was the biggest thing. When we bring someone back, they were so afraid of that, or being labeled and judged as a person with a serious problem. You know, we have to learn to look past that and look at the individual. That's what I truly think they all need at that point. The last thing I'll leave you with is, you know, if you see someone that's being mistreated with a problem or a dependency, you should speak up. You got to speak up. Help protect them. You know, you do what you would want someone to do for you, you know, with it. And that's the model that we've taken in the fire department to help. And with that, this year, in 2018, we've only had 35, which is a big number still, but it's a lot less number than 156, you know, that we've been saving, you know, there. So that's what I have for you. I'm just happy to be a part of this team of being more proactive than reactive on this. Hopefully I never have to even use another Narcan injection again, but we're here for you, more than just for the Narcan, for support. You can always stop by a firehouse, and if you need a place to go or a place that we can help get you there, we definitely won't turn you away, and we're here with you to support you.
Thank you, Chief. I think that's really good information to know for members of our community. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce the City of Southfield's Police Chief, Eric D. Hawkins. Chief Hawkins joined the Southfield Police Department as a police cadet in 1990. He was appointed as a sworn police officer in 1991 and continued to rise through the ranks, officially being appointed as police chief in 2012. A longtime resident of Southfield, Chief Hawkins has implemented initiatives to enhance police-community relations, has numerous professional affiliations, and serves as a board member for several nonprofit organizations. Chief Hawkins.
Well, thank you, Judge, and I echo what the other speakers have said. I'm so proud to be a part of this team, and I'm proud of what you've been doing, Judge, with this whole issue, not just with this, but with other things that you're doing in the community as well. And so, you know, the judge wanted me to talk a little bit about the impact that this is having on local law enforcement operations. And the sheriff talked about it from a global perspective, but what we're seeing around here is it's just really taxing the resources of local law enforcement. And 10 years ago or so, the prevailing orthodoxy in law enforcement was when we had problems like this, that we simply tried to arrest our way out of it. Put them in jail, forget about them, move on to the next call. And what we started to see was that was an incredibly inefficient way of dealing with this sort of problem. Sorry. But that was an incredibly inefficient way of dealing with this type of problem, because we continually went back and we were devoting resources to the same problem, and a lot of times with the same people. And so we started to shift. There was a paradigm shift especially in local law enforcement, and how we dealt with this problem. But first, I want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing. And what I started to see about 10 years ago or so in our city was that we were starting to see a lot more of the suspects in some of our larcenies and property crimes were addicted to opioids. A lot of it was heroin. Some of it was some of the synthetic opioids that we were seeing. But we started to see that a lot. We started to see that, that we had retail frauds. One of the other speakers before talked about how, the reasons why some of the people that are addicted, why they steal and what it could do for them. And we started to see it arise in the people that we were arresting who were addicted. And then it was the quality of life type crimes or issues. Complaints from restaurants, complaints from hotels, complaints in the neighborhood about individuals who were addicted, who were impacting their quality of life. And so what I had to do at that time was devote a lot of my resources that ordinarily I would devote to traffic enforcement and getting out into neighborhoods and having a police presence in neighborhoods. And I started to have to devote a lot of resources to those types of problems and taken away from other stuff that we could have been doing in our community. And so, but the most insidious impact, I think, of this whole crisis has been what we've seen with human trafficking and prostitution. And in our city, we have a large concentration of hotels and motels, and a lot of the motels are lower priced motels, and they're attracting people to our hotels. And we started to see about 8 to 10 years ago a rise in these in prostitution and human trafficking, and it coincided with the emergence of this whole opioid epidemic. And we started connecting these, and we started to see that we had to take a different approach to dealing with this issue. And so what we did was we took a two-pronged approach with this, and we still have the enforcement piece of it because you still have to do something about supply. And so we have officers that are, around 7 to 10 years ago, I assigned officers to task forces that dealt with enforcement of the supply part of this. And we're starting to see some huge gains in arresting individuals who are selling these things and those sorts of things.
Only more supply out there. Afghanistan, who knows, what's going on over there. They allow the opium warlords to more or less take over.
Exactly, and that's
the supply. Years ago, when I was at a drug class at Wayne County Community College, where do you stop it? They'll just come up with China, with the bootleg fentanyl, which is more powerful than the pharmaceutical grade that we sell here.
Yes, sir. Very good information. And I'm sure the judge, at some point during this presentation will allow some feedback to express that.
A whole line of judges, police in front of me, in front of Judge Mosey, when they changed judges on me. This is all improper.
Yeah,
and my sister died in Florida.
Okay.
They said she didn't know her alphabet.
Thank you for that, sir. And so we're dealing with the supply side part of this. But to me, the most important piece of what we're doing in law enforcement right now and at the local level is dealing with the demand piece. Because as Chief Menifee said, it's about treating people with dignity and respect, and it's about taking a more humanitarian approach to dealing with this issue. It's no longer seeing somebody who's committed a crime or somebody who's having some issues and simply putting those people away and saying, okay, we'll get to them next time, let's go to the next run, just the facts and moving on. No, we're taking a more humanitarian approach with this whole issue. And we've gotten our officers, not just here, but in this entire region, this entire 46th District Court region, we're having officers who are participating in initiatives like Hope Not Handcuffs, where we're opening up police departments. Before, police departments were places where people who had issues didn't want to go. It was the last place they wanted to go, because if I go to a police department and I have some type of addiction, I'm going to go to jail or something bad is going to happen to me. So we're trying to change this whole thought process with individuals who are dealing with these sort of challenges to put into their minds that a police department is a place that you can go for help. We're opening up our doors. And so now they can come to a police department, to our police department and police departments in the whole entire 46th District Court region and ask for help, and they can receive that sort of help. And one of my colleagues here from the Oakland County Health Network is going to talk about, some of the things that they're doing with those individuals once we refer those individuals to social agencies like hers. And we're also participating in a program that's run by the Salvation Army, where if we're out, and we're out in the field, and we see an individual who's having some problems, who's having some issues, they're addicted to any sort of substance out there, we can refer those individuals to the Salvation Army, and the Salvation Army personnel will actually come out to the scene or to the police department and transport those individuals to a facility in either Detroit or Westland where they can get some long-term help. We're also, our Representative Moss talked about formal training for police officers. It's critical because before, as part of the ordinary formal training that police officers received, we received training in arrest procedures, search and seizure, and all these sorts of things. But we weren't talking about mental health issues. We weren't talking about individuals who have substance abuse issues. And now that has become a formal part of training in local law enforcement agencies. And to me, that's just as important as learning how to handcuff or learning how to conduct pursuit driving safely. And we're also, one of the things that we're doing, we're transitioning in our department, in Southfield Police Department. A lot of departments are doing this already, but providing Narcan for officers that are in the field. And again, I'm talking with one of our representatives from Oakland County Health Network. We will be transitioning into that fairly soon, and we'll have that option out there also so that we can help our folks. And the sheriff talked about Operation Medicine Cabinet, and we still have that in our department as well. And so, to conclude, we are undergoing this shift in how we look at this sort of problem in local law enforcement. It's no longer again, lock them up, move on to the next problem. It's more like our Chief Menifee said, it's about treating people who have challenges with dignity and respect and taking a more humanitarian approach in law enforcement to dealing with this issue. So it was a pleasure being here, and I'll take questions at the end.
There's going to be no time.
I'm going to just try to stay here and be very quick.
I've learned a lot here tonight as well. I hope you have also, as to what we are doing as a community to address community issues. Ms. Nicholas is the Administrator of Substance Use Disorder Prevention and Treatment Services for Oakland Community Health Network. She is a social worker with 22 years of professional experience providing mental health and substance use disorder services for children, adolescents, and adults. In this role, she manages all 30 publicly funded treatment and prevention services in Oakland County. And Ms. Nicholas.
So we're a little bit over in time, so I want to be very quick, but I also want to get some good information out there. First, I want to commend our law enforcement and fire, because stigma is very, very important to squash. This is a complex brain disease, and if we don't treat people with dignity and respect and help them get the services that they need, we will continue to have an issue. We saw a spike in this beginning about 2008, 2009, and really started watching our data. And at that time, really started adding services that we thought would help and benefit the community, and we're still continuing to do so. So I'll just highlight a couple. We fund and provide services through our providers, the traditional individual group family therapy, residential treatment, detox, medication-assisted treatment. But more importantly, what we found was that people need to be connected to treatment immediately. That when someone is saying that they are ready to receive help, that we can connect them to treatment. And so what we opened was our Sober Support Unit, and that's at our Resource and Crisis Center. Tracy will have, from Families Against Narcotics, today at the training, she'll have brochures of ours that have our 24-hour crisis line number, as well as our access number. I encourage anyone who needs assistance to contact that, and we will navigate you through treatment. Whether you have private insurance, you have no insurance, you have insurance with very high deductibles, contact our Access Center and we can help you. The Sober Support Unit is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 365 days a year. You can walk in at 3 o'clock in the morning and say you need help, and within 24 hours, you will be transferred to the treatment that is best needed for the individual person. So there's information on our brochure about that and our information packets. Please share and share widely. We are supporting the jail program as well and wrote the jail program, and thanks to our sheriff, have initiated that. That is not just medication-assisted treatment. It is also individual and group work, and most importantly, peer recovery coach services. So a person can be followed when they're released from jail and ensure that they make their first appointment at treatment when they are released. So that is a very important program that we've started in partnership with the jail because of the high rate of overdose that comes from when people are released from incarceration. Lastly, again, we have many more services, but one thing that is just very open to the community is our RISE Center, Recovery, Information, Support, and Education. And that is an open center that has a plethora of information regarding recovery services. It is manned by a case manager and a recovery coach. People can go there if they need help with sober housing or housing in general, clothing, food, you name it, access to apply for insurance benefits. You name it, you can go there. You don't have to qualify for any services. It's free and open to the public. And also, families have brought individuals in to talk to our recovery coach when they're worried about them and they think they need treatment. Sometimes it just is important to have a conversation with someone who is in long-term recovery, who has been there, and can talk about the importance of treatment and connection to services. Lastly, I'll talk about our law enforcement response with naloxone. That was briefly mentioned. We have offered to fund all of our 43 police agencies in Oakland County to carry naloxone, especially in the more rural areas. Oftentimes, police officers, about 88% of the time, are first on the scene. And so we want police officers to carry the naloxone as well, so if they happen upon an overdose, the overdose can be reversed. We also want that connection to individuals. You heard the chief say and the sheriff say they can't share the information with us. It was the first question we said, please let us know when you've reversed an overdose so we can have recovery coaches contact the person and encourage them to go to treatment. They can't do that right now. They're working on that. In the meantime, what we're looking to launch is a program called Project Assert, where we embed recovery coaches in emergency rooms. You have to have follow-up care when you've experienced an overdose, and what we're hoping is that our recovery coaches can be that really conduit to treatment, to really encourage a person and help navigate them to our sober support unit so we don't lose any more lives. Thank you very much. I know we're on time constraints. Please contact us.
All right, you've heard about the problems. You've heard about some of the fixes that have been instituted, but you've also heard how taxing this has been upon the community. If you're fortunate enough not to have a family member who is in the throes of addiction, like many do, this is still costing you something as a citizen in this community. Because of everything you've heard tonight, and our families are in misery, and the tax implications, as a result, there are lawsuits across Michigan and across the country seeking everything from actual damages to treble damages to punitive damages to the large pharmaceutical companies, big pharma, distributors and retailers. Why? Because much like the tobacco industry, the lawsuits allege that the pharmaceutical companies knew or should have known that this epidemic would occur when they allegedly deceived the medical community and pushed these drugs for profit. Here to explain the litigation is Attorney Mark Bernstein. Attorney Bernstein is the president and managing partner of the Sam Bernstein Law Firm. His law firm is leading an unprecedented civil litigation strategy against opioid manufacturers and distributors on behalf of over 50 Michigan municipalities. He also serves on the University of Michigan Board of Regents. Attorney Bernstein.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to be very, very brief about a topic that's enormously complex and impacts affects everybody in this state in every way. This is obviously a circumstance that has profound economic and societal impact, this opioid crisis that we face. I'm only here to talk about the legal issues related to this and the municipal litigation that many municipalities across the state, including Oakland County, are engaged in. Right now, we represent roughly 50 municipalities, big and small, all across the state. City of Detroit, City of Lansing, City of Grand Rapids, Kent County, Macomb County, Genesee County, Saginaw County, Wayne County. It's my expectation that at the end of this, virtually every municipality, large unit of government in this state, will participate in this litigation. It's the scope and scale of this crisis is very difficult to wrap our heads around. And so, in this particular instance, and this is just my opinion. You know, we saw in the video I don't think there's much of a difference between the conduct of the defendants in the claims that we're involved in, the opioid manufacturers and distributors, and the Jalisco drug cartels. They acted in almost identical ways. You look at the frequency of prescription of opioids in Michigan, about 1.2. There are about 1.2 opioid prescriptions in this state in 2016, the last measurable increment of time, for every man, woman, and child in the state of Michigan. Okay? Then when you take the profound addictive quality of this medicine, 13% of every person that takes an opioid for 8 straight days is still taking some form of an opioid 1 year later. So you take the huge number of prescriptions and the profound addictive qualities of this medicine, you couple that together and you can begin to see the size and scale and scope of this problem. So what are municipalities doing about it? And the question that appropriately is asked is, what should they be doing about it? The answer that we give is everything. Every single thing, every tool available should be used. The criminal justice system should be used. The regulatory environment should be used. More robust legislation in Lansing, thanks to some of the leaders who are here today. But also the civil justice system. And so that's where these claims are proceeding. The claims that have been filed, and many more that will be filed, really demand 2 categories of action. The first action is what's called injunctive relief. It demands that the defendants in these claims, opioid distributors and manufacturers, like Purdue and Teva and McKesson, a drug distribution company, and many others, change the way they do business. It does not have a monetary component to it. It says that the misrepresentation, misuse, and diversion of these drugs, actions that these defendants have already pled guilty to in many instances in criminal proceedings, and actions that attorneys general in 41 states are investigating, and in which hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars have already been paid to regulators for this very activity. And in fact, in certain instances, the defendants in this case, the DEA fines against and they plead guilty. These defendants, Purdue, for example, pays $100 million, $200 million fine. And they just go back and keep doing it again. It just shows you the enormity of the profits being made in this case. And we talk about this. There really were 2 addictions here. There was the addiction of the opioid user, and then, of course, there was the addiction to the profit that this was generating for these companies. So it's injunctive relief. It's about conduct. It's about behavior. It's about stopping the actions that are causing that were the beginning of this crisis. The second element is a demand for economic damage, taxpayer money back, essentially. The enormous amount of money that's been spent on behalf of municipalities at the county level, at city level, and in some instances at the state level to deal with a mess that these counties didn't create, but they have a responsibility and a burden to address. The National Council of Economic Advisors estimates that the cost of the opioid crisis so far has been $504 billion, over $500 billion, 2.8% of the GDP of the gross domestic product of this country. It's an enormous, and 25% of that, they estimate, falls on the public sector, Medicaid, Medicare, and municipal municipal services, public safety, public health, and the like. So there is a damages element to this to get taxpayer money back that falls into basically two broad categories. And in the interest of time, I'm going to oversimplify this. But it's public health and it's public safety. It's reimbursement for Narcan doses. It's for addiction-related services. It's for medical examiner services. Ingham County, for example, one of the municipalities that we represent, has as an example, has a $250,000 medical examiner contract with Sparrow Health System. It's a major hospital in the Lansing area. This time, in roughly April of last year, they blew through that $250,000, not solely, but almost entirely because of autopsies being done related to opioid addiction overdoses. That's an example of the cost that befalls municipalities. Municipalities, counties, and cities don't pay for health, the state doesn't pay or reimburse for health care in jails, for example. It's the responsibility of Oakland County, for example, or Washtenaw County. Half or more, but the estimate is half in Genesee County, another plaintiff in this case, of the inmates in the Genesee County Jail are getting some form of addiction-related service. The cost of that is estimated to be approximately $10,000 per inmate. So you can begin to add up the damage that counties and municipalities across the state and across the country are experiencing. The case is a multi-district litigation. It means that all these cases have been consolidated in one court in the Northern District of Ohio. It's called the MDL Court. And in that court, the case is proceeding under a judge named Dan Polster, a federal judge, who has been extraordinary so far in his focus on both injunctive relief and his intensity with respect to the management of this case. There's obviously many, many layers to what I just went through. In the interest of time, I'm going to sit down, and I suspect we'll have some questions as we proceed with this. But Your Honor, thank you for having me, and I'm grateful to participate. Thank you.
And before we close out our program tonight, on hand to explain the distribution of the Narcan kits is Tracy Sharikas. Ms. Sharikas is the development manager for the Alliance of Coalitions for Healthy Communities and the Oakland County Families Against Narcotics coordinator. The Alliance has over 20-plus community prevention coalitions and 8 monthly regional Families Against Narcotics meetings, including a grief group that meets monthly. Tracy is also a parent of a child in long-term recovery from heroin and knows firsthand the vicious cycle of stigma and denial that this disease brings to the family dynamic and the community as a whole. Ms. Chirikas will explain the Narcan giveaway program very briefly to you.
Thank you. I am so incredibly excited that you are all here this evening, that you are all here, I hope, to participate in the Narcan training that will immediately follow. And you will go through the training, and then you will each be given, not one per family, but each person will be given a Narcan Save a Life kit at the end of the training. So we're going to have to move a little quickly. One thing I would like to say to Attorney Sam Bernstein, while I really respect all of the lawsuits going to the municipalities, as a family member, I would really love to see litigation and class action lawsuits being brought on behalf of the families who have suffered enormously, financially, emotionally, and for the rest of our lives. So thank you for taking that on. So the Narcan training will take place in the room right next door. Thank you, Judge Nance.
And there you have it. I'd like to thank our panelists tonight, the City of Southfield, public officials that have supported this program, Channel 15, the Southfield Sun, the companies that are outside of the room, the vendors you're free to visit with. They have information for you if you'd like to take it with you. This information was, and I'd also like to thank the Southfield Human Services Department, Rhonda Terry, administrator, who has assisted with this program. This information was live streamed on the City of Southfield Facebook page. Please visit the city's page to hear this information again if you'd like. Those of you who would like to obtain the Narcan kit with training, you will exit the auditorium and go to the right. Those of you who would like to go on about your affairs tonight, thank you so much for being here. And if there are any individuals who would like to remain in the room for a question and answer period, the panel has agreed to be here a few more moments, except Chief Menifee might be with the Narcan training. But if you have any questions for the panel members that are here, just remain in the room and we'll take your questions in a moment. We just simply all have to be out of the library before 9 p.m. Thank you so much for coming. I hope it was enjoyable. Thank you again to the panel.
Coverage